Oscar as well as Eduardo introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Oscar. I will be attending New Mexico State University. I'm planning to major in electrical engineering. Um, Overall, I think I really enjoyed this project just because we promote safety as well as we have fun and learn a lot. Go ahead, Eduardo.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Pena, and I'll also be going to DU. And I'll probably study computer science, but I'm still undecided as of now.
Okay, so our objective was pretty much to create a machine learning system that can be trained to identify guns. During this time, we realized that there were a lot of unfortunate events occurring in our world, such as mass shootings in schools, in public areas, churches, anything like that. So we really wanted to create a system that would promote safety and be able to detect guns in a live video stream with good accuracy and speed, since that's going to be important to stopping anybody that has malicious intents with the weapon. So our main goal here was to promote safety, not just in public areas like schools, community centers, but realistically anywhere that um, can be used to prevent anything such as gun violence. So we really spent a lot of time researching this topic to see what we could do and what we could create in order to detect guns in a live video stream. So for this, the first step to accomplishing our goal was to get familiar with neural networks. And I'll go ahead and let one of my teammates talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so as he said, we first have had to get familiar with neural networks. And first we started off with multi-layer perceptrons, which involved input layer, hidden layers, and output layers. We also got familiar with CNN, convolutional neural networks, and mass RCNN. And I'll let Eduardo explain a little bit more.
Okay. So as Oscar said, the basic neural networks that we were working with, the MLPs, have three layers: input layers, hidden layers, and output layers. The input layers, um, the values of the input layers are taken directly from the image that you feed the system. So they are corresponding to pixel values directly from the image. Then the values of the second layer are calculated using the formula you can see in bullet point 2. They are the weighted sum plus some sort of bias, which is then converted to a value between 0 and 1 using a activation function, sigmoid or ReLU. In the next slide, you can see them. So what happens is you have, once you run the system through multiple hidden layers and you composite all these weighted sums, which have random weights at the very beginning, you will get a certain output on the output layer. For our particular example, since we were using the MNIST data set to identify handwritten digits as a way to get familiar with neural networks, there are 10 different output nodes ranging from 0 through 9, each single digit. And what you do is you compare the results that you get to the results that you expect, and then you adjust accordingly the weights. And these are the functions that we got familiar with: the sigmoid function and the ReLU function. These are used to get the final value between 0 and 1.
And then after doing a little bit more research, we found that multi-layer perceptrons do have some limitations, would impact goal, which would be a system with good accuracy and speed. So we realized that they, as Eduardo mentioned, they require a large number of nodes in the input layer. They're unable to deal with image translation, such as shifting or rotating. The bad thing about that is that they would lose all spatial information due to the flattening nature of the input images. A few other things that were limitations were the training times. They would be very extensive, as well as memory requirements would be ridiculous. So hardware would have been an issue. And so that's going to lead us into convolutional neural networks. And I'll go ahead and let Eduardo continue with this.
So CNNs add a layer, well, a couple steps before the regular MLP network structure. So first, your input, unlike in a MLP, is a 2D matrix. So it lets you keep spatial information, unlike in a MLP, where you pretty much flatten the image. You take all the rows and you make it into one singular array. So that, as Herman said, makes it lose spatial information, but we don't have that problem with CNNs. So once you have that input as a 2x2 matrix, as a 2D matrix, then you can apply these filters. As you can see in the picture and in the next slide, these are examples of filters. Filters are matrices. For this example, we have 3x3 matrix, but they could be larger, and they pick out certain features in the images, and we try to get these features in order to identify what the image is.
And so this is just the example of the handwritten digits code that we did to get us familiar and really introduce us to a image recognition system. As Eduardo mentioned, we did use the IMNIST database, which is a database that's full of handwritten digits from a lot of different people. So we ended up using that for this. We also used TensorFlow, which is a library from Google that automates all the neural network components. And then, yeah, so we had this code here. Just as an example, and really a good introduction as to something that we could reference for our final model and see how something like this would work. And then go ahead and let my teammate talk a little bit more about the MaskR CNNs.
So the CNNs, I mean, when we were looking into what we are going to use for our project, we found that the MaskR CNN is one of the latest developments in this field of research. So we decided that to use this instead of just a regular CNN, which can be pretty slow. But how this works is it has multiple different models working at the same time. So it has a CNN for image detection, which is what we discussed earlier. And then it has pretty much, instead of going through the entire image at the beginning of the process, it randomizes certain region boxes and it tries to calculate where the objects that matter are. And then you have the backend hidden layers for classification, which are pretty much like the hidden layers in the regular MLP. And then it generates a mask, which using what is called instant segmentation. And it pretty much tries to classify every pixel into a certain object. This could be done by analyzing the textures and the colors and the shifts across the image.
And then Oscar, if you want to go ahead and talk about our image annotator. Oscar, unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. So after we went from the hand digit code, we went to gun images, where we basically annotate them in a open source that is made by Visual Geometry Group, and it's called VGG Image Annotator. First, we have to load in the guns, and then trace around the gun and annotate whether it's a handgun long gun. After that, uh, we declare it if it's isolated or if it's in scene. When the annotations are saved, um, they are saved as JSON files, which are used to transmit data. If you want to go to the next slide. And so, we set up the code. Before running the live detection camera, we set this code up, which is a script that processes all our gun images annotations and splits them up into a training set and a validation set for the mask or CNN.
And so this was an open source program that our mentor found. And so we ended up tailoring it to our needs, pretty much tailoring it to our annotations and to our gun images. So we did a little bit of tweaks there, but this was an open source software that we found. And then go ahead, Oscar.
And then after doing the setup code, we use a camera detection code, which basically predicts if a gun is present in a video live stream or not. And it takes about 2 to 5 seconds to get a snapshot. And after that snapshot, it validates whether there's a gun present or there isn't. If you want to show the code.
Yeah, and the same thing with this. This was an open source program code that we found. We ended up tailoring it to our needs. So, for example, here we went from our gun block model to import our gun images. But yeah, as I mentioned, this was an open source software that we found. Here at the Santa Fe Innovation Expo, we ended up running this live demo, and we ended up actually getting some really good, very fun, interesting results. As you can see on the image to the left here, we ended up bringing this toy squirt gun that we painted all black in an attempt to be able to detect it with our system. And as you can see on both of these images, it actually found the gun really well. It outlined it very well. It mentioned that it was a handgun, and it was about 97% sure on one, 94 on the other. So we were getting some really good, accurate results in this live video feed. We did find that while we were running it live, it was a little bit slow, a little bit laggy. And so that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later for our future work. But as you can see here, we were getting some really good live results at this expo, and a lot of people seem to have a lot of interest in it as well. And then that's going to go ahead and bring us here to our results. So our system was actually, as we saw, able to isolate handguns very accurately. These are another two set of examples here where it outlined these guns and found them extremely well. These are two more simple scenes. As you can tell, there's not a whole lot going on in the back. There's fairly good contrast, so it was able to find the guns really well and really accurate. But we are going to show you guys a little bit of some of the difficulties that we had with our system as well, which were mainly because of contrast and difficult backgrounds. But I'll go ahead and let Oscar talk about these results here, and then Eduardo.
So here on the top picture, we can see a kid in scene holding a gun, which it detects it pretty well. And then at the bottom, you could see that woman with the long gun. Unfortunately, our system detected it as a handgun, even though it looks like a handgun. We think this might happen because we concentrated more on annotating handgun images.
Yeah, these are a couple of images that show another set of flaws in our system. I mean, the top image shows that it detected a pin as a gun. I mean, you can see where it thought that that was a barrel-like shape, and then where the spring could be kind of looking like a trigger. But it's definitely unfortunate that it thought that that was a gun. And then in the bottom picture, you can see that the shadow contrast on the left part of the gun messed up the detection. So the mask wasn't projected right, mostly because of all the dark shades around this left part of the gun. It still detected it as a gun, but it failed to recognize all of the gun.
And so here we have another instance where our system didn't pick up the gun at all, and that would be the image to your left on the top. The reason for this one was because we didn't have too many handgun images from the front, so our system wasn't well trained to identify them here. We believe this could be a fairly simple fix by training our system a lot better with guns from various angles, implementing, like I said, various angles, especially from the front, so that it could find it. This image also doesn't have the greatest contrast, so that may have been another reason why it didn't detect it. And then on the bottom right here, we have a rubber ducky that we ended up feeding to our system as well. The good thing is our system didn't think it was a gun. It didn't detect anything, so our system was fairly intelligent there to not mistake something simple like a rubber ducky, which shows that it does get confused, but it's mostly with objects that really do resemble handguns or long guns. And so that brings us into our future work. We believe this is a really big project and that there's a lot we could do to continue to improve it. One of the more immediate and short-term things that we can do to improve this project is collect more gun images and train them, especially with handguns or long guns from various angles. We believe that's really going to improve our speed and accuracy, which has been one of our goals from the start. Even though we do have a very good system that functions fairly well right now, obviously we mentioned that lag that we had during the expo. There's a lot of things that we could improve on. We can continue to research the topic a lot. As we mentioned, the mass RCNNs were something a little bit newer that we ended up finding and implementing into our system. So pretty much staying up to date with any good research, anything that can help continuing this project overall. And our main goal is, at some point, is to have a very polished system that can be used across the world for gun detection and just overall safety in any areas. We saw some promising results with what we have now. We're really looking forward to improving and just continuing this project. I don't know if Oscar or Eduardo would like to add anything there. If not, then that's the end of our presentation.
Nice job, guys. Judges, floor is open.
Okay, so this is Dave Janicki from Los Alamos. I was interested in how you are thinking about handling some of the problems with detection. Certainly, a gun end-on is sort of a hard problem for you, but the comparison between a handgun and a long gun, have you thought about how you might approach that?
We haven't thought about it too extensively. As we mentioned, some of the immediate things that we were looking to do is to train it with more images from different angles. We've even had the ideas of using 3D models, somehow feeding that into the system to where it can get a lot of various angles to really train the system. A lot of different ideas, but we don't have necessarily a solid next step for that specific scenario.
What would you think about capturing some sort of scaling indicator of, this is a large size handgun, this is something very much bigger, so therefore probably a long gun, this is something very small. Have you thought about that? Do you think there are any options for capturing information to provide you scaling?
I'm not sure what the options would be, because I mean, in the images that we've shown here, their gun pretty much takes the forefront. So they're all relatively large in size in context of the image. And then in like a live video feed, depending on the distance from the objects, it can mess it up. So I'm unsure as to how we would go about trying to tackle something like that. But it is an interesting puzzle to think about that we hope to maybe try to solve.
Judges, any other
Your
questions?
existing training set.
I
And we-
don't think we heard that clearly. If you would mind repeating that.
How many images do you have in your existing training set? And yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so we collected a total of about 3,000 to 4,000 images. We looked over a lot of those images. Some of them we got rid of because they just were very blurry or whatever the case may be. But as far as what we have trained, I don't know the exact number, but I believe we're looking at about 600 images trained at the moment. I'm not sure if Oscar or Eduardo could verify that.
Yeah, it's about 600.
So you mentioned painting your toy gun black in order to have it recognized. What would happen if you hadn't painted it? Would it ignore it? Would that be a way to hide guns from your system?
No, actually, it would still detect it. We painted it black in order to get better contrast during the live video feed, since,
Well,
as we mentioned. Go ahead, Eduardo.
when we initially thought that might be a factor, which is we painted the gun before a while before we did the live demo, and we thought that there would be a contrast. But after running some of the images, if you can see the one with the pin on it, I mean the color didn't seem to affect it much. So I don't think the color would really affect it.
I believe I can show you guys a sample output that we had, which was a green. It was a green squirt gun that we had, and it did end up picking that one up. Let me see if I can find it here. That's not it. That was the paper clip. Yeah, so let me. So if you guys can see this image here, it did end up picking up this gun, even though it's a squirt gun and the gun is green, the trigger is purple. So it did end up picking it up here fairly well. But keep in mind, it is on a white background, so it's very well contrasted.
Good.
Oh,
All right.
one of the
Judges, anything else? Drew?
Yeah, one of the primary ways that toy guns are distinguished from real guns is that, you know, toy guns tend to have an orange at the end of the barrel. And if you thought about including that in your model?
Yeah, so we did briefly discuss it, since, as you mentioned, like BB guns and squirt guns, a lot of them have an orange tip. We don't know exactly how we would implement that into our system just yet. There's many possibilities, but that was always a thought in the back of our mind.
So when you annotated these images, did you happen to leave any out for a validation set that you could use after you performed your training?
So these images we showed here at the end weren't even annotated. So these were feed into the system like brand new.
Right, I'm just talking about in general when you were doing your training. You fed a whole bunch of these images into your network to let them see and train. Then often at the end, the recommended practice is to keep a few images away just so that you can check your neural network after you're done training to see how many guns it would be able to successfully pick up. I was wondering if that had made it into your project or not. It's okay to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that had not. We had not really gotten to that point. This was still an ongoing project, and we were still actively working on it when obviously school got canceled. We had spring break, all that type of stuff. So we haven't been in too much contact with our mentor and working with it. But no, that's definitely something that we definitely need to consider and look at.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, judges? All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. You guys have a good one.
You too.
Have a good day.